Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving straight into that comparison you've been asking for. We're looking at large language models, LLMs, specifically China versus the United States.
Yeah, it's a hot topic.
Totally. We've pulled together the latest research. We want to break down what they can do now, the considerable costs involved,
Huge costs.
and also the very different rules, the regulations shaping how they grow in these two tech powerhouses.
Right.
Our goal here is simple.
Yeah.
Give you the key insights. What's the state of the competition, and what does it mean for AI's future?
It's absolutely crucial to understand right now. I mean, the speed of change. Since things like Word2Vec and the transformer architecture, it's just remarkable.
Isn't it?
And by next year, 2025, they're going to be so fundamental across so many industries.
Right.
But there are these, serious global challenges, too. The energy use is one big one.
Oh, yeah?
And ethics, regulation, it's complex.
Yeah.
And with the U.S. and China really competing for that AI leadership spot, this kind of comparison, more important than ever.
Exactly. So in this deep dive, we're tackling those big questions, like where do they actually stand right now?
Yeah.
U.S. versus China LLMs.
In terms of sophistication, innovation.
Yeah. And what specific things are they good at? Where do they maybe lag a bit?
Performance metrics, basically.
Right. And the money side, what's the investment needed? Training, deployment, how does that differ?
Big topic.
Then regulations. How do those different approaches, China's versus the U.S.'s, how do they actually influence development and, the applications?
Yeah, the impact is potentially huge there.
And finally, we'll sort of zoom out, look at the broader geopolitical stuff, the economic factors in this really significant AI landscape.
Okay.
Let's start with capabilities. What can these models actually do?
Okay. So comparing capabilities. What's really fascinating is where each side seems to be focusing its energy. Take accuracy. Right now, U.S. proprietary models, think GPT-4o, Claude 3.7, Sonnet, they seem to have an edge, especially in things like OCR, optical character recognition. Sources show really impressive accuracy, like 92% to 96%, on complex stuff like healthcare records.
Wow. That has real implications for efficiency, doesn't it? Especially in critical areas like healthcare.
Definitely. Streamlining those workflows could be a total game changer.
But it's not completely one-sided, is it?
No, not at all. Not at all. When you look at Chinese models like GLM4, that's a leading one, they're really strong in handling long texts, long sequences.
Yeah.
In fact, for long documents in Chinese, GLM4 actually does better than GPT-4 Turbo.
Really?
Yeah, it scored 84 on long bench for Chinese. GPT-4 Turbo was 79. Even in English long context stuff, it's competitive. 87.3.
Huh. So they're closing the gap pretty fast.
Yeah.
Especially for tasks needing, processing big chunks of information.
Seems like it, particularly in specialized areas.
So U.S. maybe leads on some accuracy metrics, but China's pushing hard, especially on long text, at least in Chinese.
Okay.
What about handling multiple languages?
That's key for global use, right? U.S. models, especially the top-tier ones like Gemini 2.5 Pro, they seem pretty consistent across a lot of languages.
What consistent?
Like 95 to 98% accuracy, even for low-resource languages without tons of digital data.
That's impressive. Points to a real focus on broad global reach.
It does.
And how do the Chinese models stack up on multilingual tasks?
They're also showing strong capabilities there, something like QuenVL Max. It hits 95% across 23 languages, and 95% specifically for Chinese.
So good performance, but maybe more focused optimization.
Exactly. It highlights that focus on optimizing for specific linguistic domains. But there's some interesting research. Used MLR Bench, it suggests this linguistic distance effect.
Linguistic distance, what's that?
Basically, performance on these long context tasks, it tends to be weaker for languages that are structurally really different from English, like Chinese, compared to languages closer to English.
Okay, so morphology, sentence structure, all that plays a role in how well they handle long text in different languages.
Yeah, it seems to be a challenge both sides are, actively working on.
Got it. So it's not just translation, it's deeper understanding of language structure in context.
Okay.
We've looked at accuracy, multilingual skills. Where are these models actually used? Like real-world applications in China and the U.S.
Right. And this is where you really see the different priorities coming through. U.S. models, they're getting heavily integrated into existing enterprise software. Think Microsoft products, Duolingo for language learning.
Yeah, you see it popping up everywhere.
And there's a big emphasis on safety features,
Yeah.
making them suitable for regulated industries, legal, finance, compliance.
Makes sense. Reflects the U.S. market, established businesses, navigating regulations.
Precisely.
What about China? Where are their LLMs making the biggest splash?
China's strengths, they seem really strong in finance, using them for fraud detection, risk assessment,
Yeah.
stuff that's critical in their fast-growing financial sector. Healthcare, too, big strides there, assisting with drug discovery, clinical support. We even saw this example, Asian Hospital. Reportedly got over 93% accuracy diagnosing respiratory diseases on a standard medical test.
93% on MedQAA.
Wow.
Wow, that's potentially transformative for healthcare access and outcomes.
It really is.
Any other standout examples of specialized uses in China?
Oh, yeah. Legal tech is growing. And insurance. Sunshine Insurance Group. They developed an LLM, improved information extraction by 15%.
Significant.
And automated injury claims processing. Got 96% accuracy classifying the documents involved.
96%.
It really shows how they're tailoring these LLMs for very specific industry pain points within their own market.
So it looks like, broadly speaking, U.S. focus is maybe wider integration regulated industries. China's drilling down on specific high-impact applications in key sectors like finance and healthcare.
That seems to be the pattern, yeah.
Okay, let's switch gears. Let's talk cost. Because developing and deploying these massive models, it can't be cheap.
No, you're absolutely right. The financial side is substantial. It's actually interesting. Some research suggests only like 19% of enterprises, less than 1 in 5, are seeing a really significant revenue boost, like over 5% from generative AI right now.
Still early days for ROI then.
Could be. And how it's funded differs too. In the U.S., it's largely private sector investment, right? Venture capital, big tech companies.
Right.
In China, much stronger government role. Big state funding initiatives. We're talking potentially $138 billion aimed for by things like the National Innovation Investment Guidance Fund.
Wow, $138 billion. It's a massive difference in the funding model. How does that affect the actual costs developers and users face?
Well, one factor for China is the U.S. export restrictions on advanced AI chips. That definitely adds cost pressure.
Yeah, must do.
But it's also acted as this, powerful incentive for them to develop their own chips. Domestic innovation, companies like Huawei, Cambricon, they're investing heavily.
So kind of a double-edged sword. Short-term pain, maybe long-term gain in self-sufficiency.
Potentially, yeah. It could lead to more cost control within China's own AI ecosystem down the line.
Makes sense. What about the actual usage costs?
Yeah.
Pricing for organizations using these models, how does that compare?
We're seeing different strategies. OpenAI's GPT-4, super capable, but can get really expensive if you use it a lot, like 20 times more than GPT 3.5 sometimes.
20 times. Ouch.
Yeah. Whereas other models, like Google's Palm 2, seem positioned as more cost-effective for, say, moderate usage. It's likely, though we have less public data, that Chinese models are really pushing affordability for their domestic market to drive adoption.
Yeah, that accessibility angle would be key in China's huge market. What about how they're deployed? Cloud versus hosting it yourself. Does that change the cost picture much?
Oh, absolutely. Cloud services, they're convenient, lower upfront cost, good for mid-sized applications. But as you scale up, get really high volume, maybe around 8,000 conversations a day, that kind of level. Self-hosting open source models can actually work out cheaper, even with the hardware investment up front.
Right, trade-offs.
And this space is moving fast. There are innovations in memory management, like VLLM, that could make self-hosting more efficient, maybe shift that balance again.
So the best approach really depends on your scale. Are there any other sort of breakthrough technologies on the horizon that could seriously cut these costs?
This is where it gets really exciting. There are researchers, UC Santa Cruz, developing something called ternary neural networks.
Ternary, meaning 3.
Exactly. Instead of complex math, they simplify computations down to basically just addition, using only 3 values, -1, 0, and 1.
Okay. How does that help?
The potential energy efficiency gains are massive. They're talking like a 50-fold increase compared to standard GPUs.
50 times.
50 times. While getting similar performance to models like Meta's Llama.
That's incredible. What kind of real-world impact could that have on costs?
Huge, huge impact. They estimate it could drastically cut the daily energy bill for running a big model like ChatGPT 3.5, which right now is estimated around $700,000 a day.
$700,000 a day.
Just on energy. This could slash that. Plus, maybe a 10x reduction in memory needs, 25% faster.
Wow. That feels like a potential game changer, making these tools way more sustainable, more accessible.
Exactly. It could really help democratize things, especially for smaller organizations currently priced out by those huge compute costs.
Incredibly intriguing.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move to another crucial piece, governance. How are these powerful tools being regulated? What are the frameworks in China versus the US?
Yeah, and here we see a really stark difference in approach. China, they've gone for a pretty comprehensive, quite stringent framework, big laws like PIPL, the Personal Information Protection Law, and the Data Security Law.
Right. Big focus on data.
Huge focus on data governance, security, and they have specific rules for generative AI too, mandating labeling of AI content, protecting personal data.
So very top-down, control-oriented.
Yes, it emphasizes control, ethical guardrails, which, might slow down commercialization a bit, but fosters that ethical dimension.
Okay. What about the US approach?
Much more permissive, generally, and sector-specific. There isn't one big federal AI law.
No overarching rules.
Not really. You have specific guidelines for, say, finance or healthcare, but that leaves gaps, creates inconsistencies, especially around things like liability, who's responsible if an AI causes harm.
That's a tricky area.
It is. You do see state-level stuff like California's bot disclosure law, but no unified federal approach yet.
So, China. Comprehensive control, maybe slower commercialization, but clearer rules. US, more flexibility, faster innovation, maybe, but potential gaps and inconsistencies.
That's a good summary.
How might these different philosophies play out globally?
Well, China's Digital Silk Road Initiative is one factor. They're promoting their tech standards internationally.
Right.
So their approach to AI regulation, like the mandatory labeling of AI content coming in September 2025, that could really influence global standards. Countries adopting Chinese tech might adopt similar rules.
So China's regulatory model could actually spread through its tech exports.
Interesting. Potentially, yeah. It positions them as a key player in global AI governance discussions.
Okay. Now, we can't talk LLMs without hitting the energy issue again and the environmental impact. We touched on the potential efficiency gains, but what's the current situation?
Yeah, the current energy use is, well, it's pretty significant. Training just one big model, like GPT-3, can use the energy equivalent of like 120 years of electricity for an average U.S. home.
120 years.
Yeah.
For one training run.
Roughly, yeah. That's massive. And that contributes to greenhouse gas emissions, obviously, especially if the power isn't clean. And it's not just training. Deploying them, running a 7 billion parameter model for a million users still needs about 55 megawatt hours.
The scale is hard to grasp. And
Yep.
those projections you mentioned earlier about future demand, straining grids.
Absolutely a concern. GPUs in the U.S. potentially hitting 4% of electricity sales by 2027, maybe 14% of commercial needs by 2030.
14%.
Wow. And China's data centers could reach 6% of national electricity demand by 2026. With their reliance on coal, the environmental impact is major worry.
So it's not just the dollar cost, it's a serious environmental cost too. Are there viable solutions being worked on besides the ternary networks?
Yes, thankfully. There's a definite push towards renewables. Microsoft's big 10.5 GW deal is a good example.
Okay.
Liquid cooling for data centers is becoming more common. That can cut cooling power needs by up to 90%.
90%, that's huge.
Yeah, and even operational tweaks. Singapore, for instance, raised the recommended operating temperature for data centers slightly to save energy, but government responses are varied. Some places are pausing new data center builds because of grid strain. Others, like India, are boosting solar adoption.
And rising electricity prices globally must be adding pressure too.
Definitely. It's another threat to the long-term scalability if costs keep climbing.
So it needs a mix of things. Tech innovation, policy, shifting to renewables.
A multifaceted approach, exactly.
Okay, finally, let's talk accessibility and maybe some of the broader societal ethical things. Who gets to use these tools?
That's a really critical point. In China, for example, LLM development is heavily concentrated. Eastern, southern tech hubs.
Like where the big tech companies are.
Yeah. And that creates a digital divide. Western, central regions, they face barriers. Cost, infrastructure.
So the benefits aren't necessarily spread evenly.
Not automatically, no.
And we also have issues like, well, chatbots making things up, bias in the data.
Absolutely. The Air Canada chatbot incident giving wrong info, that's a real risk. Hallucinations and bias. LLMs learn from online data, so they reflect the biases present there. That needs rigorous testing, fine-tuning, transparency. accountability.
Definitely. Are there efforts to make them more reliable, more accessible?
Yeah, some interesting approaches. Things like hybrid human-AI feedback loops,
Yeah.
PROF, CO, used in education. Human oversight improves reliability, makes them more usable.
Okay, humans in the loop.
Multi-agent systems, too,
Yeah.
like agent laboratory. Multiple AIs working together could make complex tasks more accessible for non-experts. And on the regulation side, Japan's broad definition of AI-related technologies is interesting, offers a comprehensive oversight model.
But the bigger societal questions remain, right? Job displacement, equity for marginalized groups.
Huge questions, really important considerations as this tech rolls out.
Okay, so wrapping this deep dive up, what are the main takeaways?
Well, to summarize, it seems the U.S. currently holds an edge in, let's say, overall accuracy and complex reasoning. GPT-4o, Quad 3.7, they're very strong. But China is advancing incredibly quickly, especially in multilingual areas, cost efficiency, and those really targeted domain-specific applications we talked about. And that's fueled by massive government support and that push for domestic innovation, like with chips.
Right, and the regulatory paths are just very different.
Very different, influencing commercialization speed, ethical priorities.
And energy and access remain big challenges for both.
Absolutely, critical hurdles.
And that detail about the ternary neural networks, potentially slashing energy costs for something like ChatGPT by, hundreds of thousands a day, and cutting hardware needs.
Yeah, that's genuinely remarkable. It really suggests a future where these incredibly powerful tools might become much more sustainable, much more accessible than we perhaps thought possible even a short while ago.
Really gives you something to think about.
It does. And it leads to maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to consider. Given these really distinct regulatory approaches, these different philosophies, and the fact that AI tech is spreading globally, how might the contrasting paths of the U.S. and China ultimately shape international standards? And how we use these powerful tools ethically around the world. It's a landscape that is just constantly shifting, right? And staying informed, continuing to explore these developments. That's going to be key to understanding the really profound impact this all will have.